just want to say, as part of Partners Wine, we've been enjoying a relationship, first of all, with Arizona before Shelby came into the picture. And it's just gotten better and better with Shelby in the picture. And it's a very fun relationship. And we're delighted on behalf of Yamhill to have you guys now 2 states, and who knows where the future might take us. We'll know in a couple of hours. But it is a partnership, and it's a family partnership. And I'm very excited about it, and I'm very excited about for what California can do. Those of you, obviously, everybody else is in the loop that not only is it Yamhill, but it's also Treebo Champagne, and down the road will also be a couple of other, a Bordeaux and an English sparkling, and they just set the seed there. But it is a partnership, and it's been a real pleasure working with all of y'all. And I think what we've been able to do already is just the beginning. So with that, I am delighted to have the whole Treebo, the whole Yamhill family, except one of you will probably talk to it, but Jenny cannot or chose not to join us for a very good reason. She's a newlywed, like literally what, 3 days? 2 days?
Two days ago.
So, but everybody will
get to pass.
Everybody, it'll pass. Is that what you said?
He said she gets a pass.
Oh, she gets a pass. I thought you said it'll pass. I'm going, wait a minute, I'm a newlywed. It hasn't passed.
I was like, wow, Patrick.
Oh my gosh.
Anyway, but we've got really the mover and shakers of Yamhill here with Greg and with Ariel. So with that, folks, take it away. And I'm going to mute.
Awesome. Appreciate it, Jack. Thanks. Yeah. Also, thanks again to everybody for taking part in all this. I'm not going to ramble on and all the minute little things, but I'm going to just touch on some history and then pass it over to Ariel to get a little more specific about our vineyard and winemaking philosophy. So I'm Greg Berger. I'm the 2nd generation family owner of Yamhill. I'm our vice president, our national sales representative. And the winery and the vineyard was founded by my dad and my stepmom, Dennis Berger and Elaine McCall. So Jenny is their daughter and my half sister. I've aged her by 20 years, but we're a fun, diverse team. We don't take ourselves too seriously. We love our property, and we are incredibly fortunate to have Ariel running the show in the cellar and making our wines. So founded in 1983, that was our first vintage. My dad was a home winemaker making Pinot Noir in the garage in Southwest Portland in the late 70s. And that passion led him to shop for some property and start a small hobby vineyard. Well, he doesn't do things small, so that evolved into a 150-acre property that we own west of McMinnville with 115 acres planted right now. So 1983 was our first vintage that we made in a neighboring cellar. We planted our site 82, 3, 4, 5, and then some later plantings. Our first vintage at our own winery was 1986, and we've been 100% estate grown and produced since then. When we bought the property, the core of vineyards and wineries in Oregon was located closer to Portland, Newburgh, and Dundee, kind of central northern Willamette Valley. A unique aspect of us is that we are west of McMinnville, and McMinnville has evolved into kind of the centerpiece of Oregon wine country. We pioneered the McMinnville AVA, and I'll touch on that a little bit. Very unique district. It's a key selling point in our wines that make us distinct and different than a lot of other brands and wineries and vineyards in Oregon. We're the oldest winery in the McMinnville AVA and the second oldest vineyard. This year was our 40th anniversary. So we're really proud of that history there. The vineyard site sits between 200 and 600 feet elevation, kind of south facing sloped hillsides. And like I said, 115 acres planted right now to Pinot Noir and Pinot Blanc primarily. Those are our flagship wines. We also make Pinot Gris, Chardonnay, and some Riesling. And we can get into the details of those more when we're tasting together. But I want to touch back just briefly on McMinnville and our unique location. The coastal range was formed 40 million years ago, and there was some tectonic uplifting which exposed some marine soils, and we grow our grapes in the oldest soils in Oregon, and it's a very unique district. That's a rare location in the northwest corner of the valley where we have marine soils and basalt with clay and silt kind of fingers that run throughout the vineyard. And it's the only district in Oregon that's like that. And so when you think McMinnville wines and what that relates to the finished wines and our style, we have a really strong backbone of tannin, acid, darker fruits, spice, and earth. The white wines tend to be fruit forward, lots of minerality, and also that acid motif that runs through the lineup. And that's something we're super proud of. And, you know, as we get into discussing winemaking philosophy and technique, you know, the primary overruling thought is that they're place wines, that we really want them to reflect where they were grown and the vintage. And there's a unique style that runs through our wines that you'll see as you start exploring the different vintages. You know, as you get out on the streets and start selling these wines. And I know in Arizona, they've just had some great success with it. And I know it's a really competitive market out there. There's a lot of Willamette Valley wines and Pinot Noirs in the market. Our overriding, most unique aspect is our location and the style of wines that we make from our unique vineyard site. One last little tidbit too, you know, when that property was purchased, it was not really even considered vineyard land. And we were very fortunate to purchase that property, not in today's kind of real estate market. And something we're very proud of is that obviously we're estate grown and produced, but when it comes down to the pricing structure of our wines, they're incredibly affordable in our minds of the standard of quality. So, you know, I think we really represent this quality, price, value for really highly rated wines grown in a very unique district. So when you think Yamhill, you think McMinnville. And when you think McMinnville, it's that unique district with the marine soils and the basalt intrusions that we have in the vineyard. So, you know, I can't really stress that enough. I love getting out on the street and selling our wines and telling our family story and history. I always touch on McMinnville, the unique soil types that we have there that only exist in our AVA, and that we've been farming for 40 years in this area, and we've pioneered that style. And that's really what sets us aside and is a unique, you know, selling aspect of the wines. So we're family owned and produced. Everything's estate grown and produced from our own site. And we've been doing it for 40 years. As far as just a little more specific on the Pinot Noir side, before Ariel takes over and gets a little more in some more detail, you know, we've got 5 different clones of Pinot Noir in play in the vineyard. The original plantings, which that's what everybody planted in Oregon, was the Pomard and Wadensville clones. We love those sections of the vineyard, and we've also added 3 different Dijon clones that are in play. And so we have a pretty unique vineyard that gives us options with multiple blends and the ability to really fine tune our wines. We make 3 tiers of Pinot Noir, with our estate being the bread and butter. We make a reserve and a premium reserve called Tall Poppy. We don't make the reserve every year. It's got to be of that quality. And the Tall Poppy is just a winemaker selection in years. There we go, Jack. In particular years where there's a special vintage, and Ariel might decide that we've got a few barrels that are distinct, and we're going to hold those back and do some extended barrel aging for a premium reserve. So the Tall Poppy is something that we can talk about down the road to maybe bring some of that in for some accounts where it makes sense. Yeah. I'm trying to think of any other little side tidbits. Of course, you know, my focus is sales. So when I do these presentations, I'm always thinking about tools I can provide you guys with, unique aspects of what makes us different than our neighbors. And, you know, it's our history, it's our location, and it's that end style of our wines really reflecting our unique terroir. And as you get more familiar with the wines and you're out on the street with them more, you'll start to see that house flavor and style that's kind of distinctly McMinnville for us. So I guess with that said, I guess one last little tidbit, our label, that's the Western Meadowlark. That's the Oregon state bird on our label, and it's on the Oregon grape. Yamhill is a county in Oregon. We were one of the first wineries and vineyards in that county, and so that's where Yamhill Valley Vineyards comes from. So I guess we'll pass over to Ariel, and she can get a little more specific into winemaking philosophy, vineyard specific stuff. And I'm assuming you guys are going to want to taste through some wines as she's presenting.
Yeah, my understanding is there aren't wines to taste right now, but I will talk about all of the wines. And as you're sharing those wines, you can, create your own opinions about it and get acquainted with it. And sometimes it takes a little time to visit those wines and do that with patience. So I encourage you to do it thoughtfully. So I'm Ariel. I'm Ariel Eberly. I've been with Yamhill Valley Vineyards since 2008. I started as a harvest intern when I was 25, and I worked with Stephen Carey. And Stephen Carey was our winemaker from 1991 until 2016 when he passed the torch to me. So over these last 40 years, we've had 3 winemakers, and I feel like that is a pretty rare thing for a medium-sized winery in itself. So Dennis Berger, the owner of the winery, being the first winemaker from 83 to 90, Stephen Carey, 91 to 2016, and then continued to work as winemaker emeritus with me for 2 more years until he passed. Something that I think is of value to share with you in relation to the history is the Burgundy Challenge. So in 1985, we had our 1983 vintage go up against 10 Burgundies, and it was called the Burgundy Challenge because it was Oregon versus Burgundy. And this was all kind of a passion project from Stephen Carey. So Stephen is an unforgettable person. He is no longer with us in this realm, but his legend carries on, and he was stubbornly dedicated to Pinot Noir and loved Burgundies, but saw the value in Oregon Pinot Noir long before it became widely accepted. And creating this challenge with the Burgundy Challenge is a huge part of what put Oregon on the map. And perhaps you all are familiar with the story. They held the competition, a blind tasting at the New York Wine Center, and it was 10 producers from Burgundy versus 10 producers from Oregon. And they did it all blind, although Elaine McCall, Dennis's wife and one of our owners, she knew which wine it was because of how dark it was. And I think, if we're going to circle back on McMinnville AVA, I think that can be a really illustrative part of the way that McMinnville AVA really stands out. So because we're in the Van Duzer corridor, we're getting a lot of the wind and the cooling effect from the Pacific Ocean. We're only about an hour away from the Pacific Ocean. And that wind comes in as things heat up inland and cools things down, and also really strengthens the skins of the grapes. So we have thick skins, which contribute to the structure and the color and the depth in our Pinots. And that is what Elaine saw on the table at the Burgundy Challenge, was this very dark colored Pinot Noir. And that is something that carries through today with our wines. We've learned to quote unquote tame the tannic beast that is the YVV terroir. So we're doing a lot of pre-fermentation maceration in riper years, allowing the fruit to cold soak and sit on the skins, and kind of allowing that juice to become more what the fruit is before kicking off fermentation. And anyway, the results of the Burgundy Challenge were 3 Oregon wineries in first, second, and third place, Yamhill Valley Vineyards taking first place. So these wines are very distinct and special, and even the French agreed. There were French judges on that panel, and they were so upset about it that they actually decided that there should be a rematch, and we had the same results in the rematch. So tried and true and consistent. And that's something that we're really proud of. And it was an honor to have Stephen Carey use our wines as a big part of the motivation for creating that challenge. So that's a fun story for your customers and friends that are buyers to share, that kind of bring back a piece of history that's really pivotal to Oregon. So more about us. Our vineyard is really the star of our brand. So as Greg said, we're spanning from 200 up to a little over 600 feet elevation. We have amazing variation in our soils, and that leads to my part in all of this, being the third winemaker and building on the shoulders of the giants that came before me, and working with both of them over many years, learning from them. I have now had the opportunity to fine-tune the winemaking. So a big part of that is finding the right place for each block in our program. So the Pinot Blanc, for example, that comes from a lower part of our vineyard, about 200 to 300 feet elevation, a little more water holding capacity in that soil. We don't have we love acidity, but we don't approach the Pinot Blanc as being a really austere style. We want to give it a little bit more hang time. And the vintage that you're starting out with is the 2022. And that is 2022 was one of the ripest years that we have seen. We had a really warm October, and that contributed a lot to the ripeness. So we brought that fruit in, giving it a little more hang time as we normally do, and everything was so beautiful. We did a small portion of it in extended skin contact, about 22 hours, and then about 12% of that blend went into a once filled puncheon. And I can go into a lot of detail with the winemaking, but just kind of trying to hit some of the standout points that made that vintage unique. It has been very well received. The texture is beautiful. I think as my time as a winemaker has progressed, I've been a lot more focused on texture. So something to point out as well while you're out in the field sharing these wines, thinking about the texture, and of course the aromatics and the flavors as well. But our wines and these varietals, as you know, are really beautiful to be paired with food. So any opportunity that you have to do that, I encourage you to bring different, even if it's simple types of cheeses or or whatever it may be, bringing food into the equation can really make our wines shine. The rosé comes from the lower part of our site, so the cool air will settle in the evenings and in the mornings, and then we also select from the first 12 rows of that block, which is a different clone. It's one of those Dijon clones, the 115, which is later ripening, so we get to hold on to the acidity and also develop more of those red fruit summer flavors like strawberry and watermelon and really nice bright rosé. And that took a few years after we started our rosé program to really know which part of the site was going to be the best for that. So I think that you guys have 4 cases of the 22 rosé in your inventory now, so you can move through that before the turning of the calendar. Such a funny perception with time with rosé sometimes, but that's a good one to get started with. And then our estate. So our estate is, although all of our wines are estate grown, produced, and bottled, our estate Pinot Noir is really going to be the best representation of the entire site. So this is really talking about the layers of complexity. So there's the first layer of complexity, which is this amazing place. Greg talked about the soils, and we really do see the Pinot Noir illustrate really different flavor profiles depending on which soil it's grown in. And every block is so distinctive. We're at the point now where we can taste through the blocks, and we purposefully keep them all separate and pick them individually when they ask us to be picked. When they're showing that their flavors are ready, that's when we pick. A lot of our decisions are really about listening. So listening with all of our senses. And that was another philosophy that was passed down to me by Stephen Carey is if his life tells you anything about how special this place is, he spent so many years here, so many decades here. And then he was very connected to here, some places in New Zealand, and then also in Southern Oregon. When he passed away in 2018, he wanted some of his ashes spread here. And he actually has a tombstone here that says, "We didn't tell them, they told us." And he was talking about the vines. So philosophy of, we're not trying to make this into something that we deem it should be. We're listening to the fruit, we're listening to the vintage, and we're holding the hand of that fruit as it moves through the winery, which brings me to the second layer of complexity, which is during fermentation in the cellar. So those choices are when the fruit is picked, what type of yeast we might be using with it, the fermentation kinetics, how much stem is going to go into it, if it's going to be a % whole cluster, or if it's going to get all destemmed. And we have six 6-ton fermenters that we use every vintage, but then we also use macro bins that hold about 1.5 tons each. So we get a lot of different vessels to be able to use to blend together later to create that second layer of complexity. And then the third layer of complexity is our barrel program. So another important thing about us is maintaining the purity of the vineyard and not overwhelming it with new oak. So the most new French oak that you will see in our wines is 20%. And a lot of that has to do, again, with purity, really allowing that fruit, allowing the star of our brand to really show and be shared with everyone that comes in touch with that bottle. The reserve is going to spend a little bit more time in the barrels, so you get a little more concentration for that, a little more barrel character, and those wines are blended to be a little more ageable as well. So you'll see some older vintages with the reserve as well as the tall poppy. And the tall poppy is another funny story. So it's a reference to, we have a friend we have quite a few friends in New Zealand, and one very good friend that helped us plan some of our sites here, some of our blocks here, Dominic Mondillo of Mondillo Vineyards in Bendigo on the South Island. So tall poppy is a reference that comes from there and from England, and it's a reference to someone who's very arrogant and full of themselves, but they deliver. And when Dennis Berger talks about a tall poppy, he describes the man wearing a sports jacket with leather patches on the elbows and tassels on his shoes. And then you look at his outfit and you're like, you're describing your own outfit, sir. So tall poppy is someone that will highlight themselves in that way. And it's a bit of a begrudging compliment, but it's also someone who doesn't just talk the talk. They also walk the walk and they deliver. So that's a fun way to think about tall poppy. And as Greg said as well, tall poppy is only going to happen in really outstanding vintages, and also is not made in large productions. So pretty limited availability of that, although we do have the 2015 and 16 available. What else can I tell you? Well, harvest is going to be starting soon. So this year is looking beautiful. We have a higher yield than the last 3 years. And everybody here is getting excited, and we're preparing and have a great crew that's going to come out. And if any of you ever want to stop by, I think a lot of the experience of these wines has to do with experiencing the place and experiencing the energy of the people who are here. Our vineyard manager, Carlos, has been with us for over 30 years. He treats this place like it is his own. It is an absolute honor to work with the fruit that Carlos and his team grow and nurture. We have a strong commitment to sustainability. To be more specific, we are caretakers of the soil, and we understand that soil health goes back to our precious Willamette River and the waterways in this country and globally. So trying to use different ways of approaching farming that reduces erosion. Another thing that we do in relation to sustainability is the way that we source our glass. We're sourcing our glass locally from a plant that manufactures it in the Portland area. So we're really conscious. I am very conscious of our CO2 footprint and making all these decisions that minimize our carbon footprint. So you know, there's some information about that on our website as well. And then the other thing is that I really want to empower all of you with as much information as we can give you. So I sent a link this morning to the trade section of our website. You can also access that by scrolling down on the homepage. It's at the bottom on the left side. And all of these text sheets are on there. And for each wine, they have information about the vineyard, the vintage, the winemaking, and the tasting notes, if that's something that you can utilize. It has a little bit of the chemistries information on there. And then we also have our tech notes that goes into a little bit more detail about the composition of the clones that are in each bottling and the harvest chemistries, the bottling chemistries. Those are the kind of things that I like to know when I visit wineries. So we put that on there if you're feeling extra nerdy and you have a nerdy client that wants to know those details.
There's also some links to accolades, scores, ratings, and you'll find that kind of stuff under that trade link.
Do you all have questions for us? Like, we want to be as relevant as possible to what you need to be successful out on the streets and with your communities.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ariel and Greg. That was really great information. And I know I missed a minute of it, but I will come back and catch the rest of Ariel's descriptions. I have some follow-up notes that I'd like to clarify, just to play a few things back to you to make sure that I'm understanding and packaging what you're saying correctly. So the first thing I wanted to ask is, you talk about the McMinnville AVA. Do you have a map that you could put up that we could show? You can, because this is my first time, and I'm going to say, as the California team's specifically first time ever selling Oregon wine. And so we love your story. We love your wines. We love everything about this, but I'm trying to frame the context of what you're doing versus what everybody else is doing, and where you are versus where anyone else is. And I think that a map would be helpful.
Yeah.
Sure.
And just to follow up on that real quick, McMinnvilleAVA.org. Awesome website, maps up there, lots of descriptions, geological history, a list of wineries. So yeah, if you have time, check out McMinnvilleAVA.org.
Ariel, do you have something that's more, like Oregon?
I can definitely send you a map of the Willamette Valley with the sub AVAs on it. I would be happy to get that on that group email and make sure that you all have access to that. And I'll include the link to the website that Greg mentioned as well.
Okay, I'm going to interrupt. I'm here, but my camera is for some reason not on. Shelby, I have that map. You actually should have a copy that is a map with lines that show AVAs, including McMinnville, and then where Yamhill is. So I'm not familiar enough with this Google Meet to see if I can pull it up right now and post it up here, but I will send it to you as we speak right now. I know you can't see my smiling face. I don't know why, and I'd like to get my banjo picture off of there, but I can't get the camera to open. I don't know, but at any rate, yes, we do have a pretty specific map.
Okay, I think that would be helpful, especially for those who are newer to selling Oregon wine. But how do we talk about this versus Sonoma Coast? How do we explain why you should care about Oregon, and specifically McMinnville and specifically Yamhill? If you could follow up with some information to help us follow that journey, that would be extremely helpful. Because I loved everything you said, and I think that what I'm missing is how do we basically set people's context for what to expect when they're thinking about Yamhill versus the universe of not only of domestic Pinot Noir.
One thing that would be helpful in creating that specificity is, I'm sure you're all familiar with the Dundee Hills. That area is north of us, and they are already bringing fruit in. So just to paint a picture in terms of growing degree days or accumulated warmth in the valley, usually northern Willamette Valley is going to start bringing fruit in 1 to 2 weeks before McMinnville. So that should illustrate that McMinnville is cooler, which means the Pinot Noir has a little more hang time, which means amazing resilience in warmer years that are becoming more and more common.
Yeah. So, and apologies if this has already been said and I'm repeating this. Is McMinnville on the southern part of the Willamette Valley?
No.
We're on the west side.
The westernmost AVA.
Thank you.
And the uniqueness, like we've touched on a few times, is our unique soil type. We're the only AVA that's primarily marine. That marine mixed with basalt really contributes to the distinct style when you say McMinnville Pinot Noir from the Willamette Valley. And so when you think that, you think darker fruits, age-worthy, food pairing, spice, earth, tannin, backbone of acidity. That's the hallmark of our AVA. We're the oldest winery in that AVA. We fought for that AVA's designation because of our history growing fruit and the site in the early days. In our early days, we had other wineries from more Central Valley that would purchase our fruit to add backbone to the softer fruit forward style wines that you get in Dundee and the central part of the valley. But westernmost, unique soil type, longer growing season, longer hang time. Those are kind of the nuts and bolts of what McMinnville AVA means. And we pioneered that. We were the first ones doing it on a large scale there. So yeah, that's some of the nuts and bolts for McMinnville. And like I said, that McMinnville AVA website is great. There's lots of geological history and discussions on, the terroir of our region.
So I'm going to play this back to you again, if you don't mind, because when we talk about training our team to present wines, we think about a framework where we say vineyard, winery, wine. And so you want to say something about the vineyard to context you, and then something about the winery, about why it's special, and then something about the style of the wine. So playing this back to you, we would say that this next wine is coming from the McMinnville AVA. It's on the western tip of the Willamette Valley. It is the only AVA with an organ that is marine influenced. And with that, you get wonderful marine soils with beautiful salt intrusions.
Correct. And
okay,
we're the 40-year-old vineyard with the longest history in this region.
Perfect. So that's bullet point number 2. So moving into winery, we're going to say, Yamhill is the oldest winery in the AVA. They were actually a pioneer of founding this AVA. And for the last 40 years, they've grown estate fruit in a sustainably conscientious way.
Correct.
What a pro.
Okay. Okay. And then we're going to talk about this beautiful 2018 Pinot Noir. It's coming, blah, blah, blah. Okay.
We love that our vintages are slightly behind some of our neighbors. Having an 18 to sell in the market right now is so great. We realized years ago that sometimes we were selling through our vintages before the wine was in its prime drinking window. And so that 18 is unique in the sense, I really doubt you're going to see any other 18s in the market that are actively being sold unless they've just been dead on a shelf for a few years. So to be able to present a wine that's not a brand new 21 vintage that's just hitting the markets right now, we've waited and we've aged these wines in the bottle for 4 or 5 years. So when they're presented to the market, they're unique. And so I do see a lot of support when I'm selling these wines all over the country based on the wine is ready to go. It's got enough bottle age in it. And it needs it because of that style, bigger structure style of wines that we sell. So great angle in selling and presenting an older estate wine as opposed to just spinning off a brand new one. And I use that as a selling point in the market all the time and discuss with people, well, what have you been tasting lately? Well, the 21 vintage. Well, remember 18? Well, we blew through those before they were drinking. Now, presenting a wine that's ready to go with that bottle age, it's a unique angle and aspect, and we love that. And then to have the 16 reserve and the 18 estate, and then we're current with the 21 Pinot Blanc right now. So it's a really fun lineup to play around with, and it's such a unique aspect to be able to roll in and show someone the 16 reserve when they might have forgot about how great that vintage was, and it's aged and ready to go right now.
Yeah, I think you're also prompting a call to action to play with decanting some of our Pinot Noirs as well, and noticing the tight structure when you first open these bottles. Again, also worth mentioning, we are entirely under screw cap. So when you open these bottles, not necessarily related to the screw cap, but related to all the things that we've been talking about, our site and that structure and the compactness of these wines when you first open them. Play with the decanting when you first open them, and then also take a moment to circle back on the second day and notice how the aromatics really bloom on the second day in our Pinot Noirs. That's when a lot of those aromatics come to life. So just a call to action on that as well.
I like that.
Is this dry farmed?
Yes, we have been entirely dry farmed since 2018.
And what about
And a lot of the vineyard has been dry farmed the entire time.
I was going to ask about yeast selection. I don't know if you talked about that. No.
So we used Stephen Carey loved D254, and that is the majority of the fermentations uses D254 yeast. It can be a very fast fermenter, and that also extracts a lot of color and depth. And since I've come on, I've played more with 3001 yeast, which is brings out a little more fruit and floral notes, and bringing those two together in the bottlings, they work really well together because they do very different things and have very different fermentation kinetics. So you get a lot of that more floral, fruit forward part in all parts of the vineyard, but especially on the hillsides with the cooler fermenter. And then you get a lot of that structure and spice and depth with the D254. And I talked to winemaker at Willa Kenzie a couple weeks ago, and he was commenting on our wines. The thing that stood out to him a lot was the spice, the spicy character of our wines, the spicy character of McMinnville AVA in general. And other brands in our area are Britain, Coeur de Terre, Maysara, maybe some brands that you've heard of, just to give you also kind of a reference for the style and the place.
Great. Leslie asked about farming, and I wanted to acknowledge that Jack shared a really great one-pager about your farming philosophy. So I'm going to send that out to everybody so that we have it. Talks about the conscientious nature of the farming. Ariel, is it safe to say that you would classify that as practiced organic? And can we call it that? Because people ask for a classification.
You can call it practiced organic. We are not certified organic, and there are certain times as we're getting close to harvest, if we need to do a sulfur spray, we will. We'd rather be able to do that, use a non-sulfur alternative going into harvest rather than have botrytis. Yeah. So there's reasons for not being certified, but we approach things organically throughout the growing season for the most part.
I have a question. You referenced the Van Duzer corridor. So why would I reference that?
Yeah. So the Van Duzer is, it's a corridor or a tunnel, basically. It's a tunnel that goes between the coastal foothills on the way out to Lincoln City. And it's almost like a little funnel that allows that cool Pacific Ocean air to funnel in to the Willamette Valley. So it's a geological feature of the western coast of Oregon.
Yeah, basically a break in the coastal range, like Ariel said, like a wind tunnel that comes through, and it really has multiple effects. Any moisture, it helps dry. So we really are mold resistant with that continual steady wind. The grapes and the berries themselves have adapted to that continual breeze, and the berry size is slightly smaller, and the skins have developed to be slightly thicker in reaction to that. So that really increases, skin juice contact in the wines as well. But it really works in our benefit to have the Van Duzer corridor, and it really does affect our finished wines. But break in the coastal range, wind tunnel, keeps things dry. It's caused the berries to develop thicker skins.
Thank you.
Jack, are you between two ferns?
So I had to. I just had my office rebuilt. This is some weird. I don't know what's going on. I had to turn the computer off,
You in the hotel lobby?
booted it, and now I've got some AI background.
I love it. I
Oh,
love it.
There's the camera. There's outside.
okay.
I don't know what's going on.
There
There is a link
Oh my God.
I
on the
started
website to the sustainability practices, the page that we were referring to. You'll find that on the website as well.
Perfect.
So
Great. I have a quick question. You mentioned, so each of your Pinot Noir blocks you pick separately. Are they vinified? I apologize if you said this already. Are they vinified separately as well and then blended, or like what does that look like?
Yes, they're fermented separately, and then we put them into barrels as individual blocks. Sometimes you have to mix some together, but we do that very consciously. With the 40 years of experience we have, we apply that, and we know which blocks historically have gone well together. So, you know, if you have a half a barrel left, you'll top it with something that's a good counterpart.
Cool. Sweet.
Great. And does anybody have any other questions? Nope.
I actually do have one quick question. Going back to geography of the area and where you're situated, would you say that since you're typically a bit cooler than everywhere else in Willamette, would that mean that your daytime temps don't get as high as everywhere else either? Or do you still get that high temperature during the daytime to create that big diurnal shift?
That's a good question. That's a good question.
We definitely still get warm. I follow the weather in all sorts of weird places, and I'll check it in Portland, and Portland is always like 5 to 10 degrees warmer. And then, you know, as you come south, like, and as you go west, things cool down gradually. So McMinnville is cooler than Newburgh. Newburgh is cooler than Portland. And then the coast is cooler than McMinnville. And we are even cooler than like McMinnville proper. We're a McMinnville address, but the town of McMinnville is usually, you know, 3 to 5 degrees warmer than we are out here in the hills.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
Great. If there's no other questions, I'm gonna end the recording.
I have a couple things, Shelby.
Well, actually, Chris, I was going to kick it to you. So,
Oh,